The shadow desire men never admit. Carl Jung's warning. Have you ever wondered why a man can appear strong, logical, and self-contained on the surface, yet secretly wrestle with impulses and longings that he would never dare to voice aloud? Beneath the polished exterior of control lies a hidden world, the shadow that Jung spoke of, the forbidden desires that men bury deep in the unconscious because they threaten the image they have built of themselves. This shadow is not always violent, but it is always unsettling. It reveals cravings for surrender, for mystery, for intimacy that dismantles the ego, and it terrifies him, because to acknowledge these hidden desires would mean to admit that he is not fully in control of himself. The male ego is carefully crafted to project dominance and certainty. Society applauds him for decisiveness, for his ability to provide, to conquer, to lead. Yet within, another force stirs, a longing to be undone, to encounter the power of the feminine that does not ask for his strength, but instead forces him to face his own vulnerability. Jung understood that men spend their lives projecting their disowned traits onto women, casting their unconscious yearnings onto the figures they chase or fear. What he rejects in himself, he secretly desires in her. This is why a woman's silence can drive him mad, why her independence gnaws at him, why her mystery seduces him far more than her compliance ever could. The shadow desire is not for the woman who flatters his ego, but for the one who dismantles it. He would never admit this craving, for it runs against his conscious narrative of superiority. Yet his behavior betrays him, the obsession, the regret, the fixation on the one who will not kneel. He cannot confess it, but his soul longs to be pierced by what he cannot control. You hearing this now might think of times when a man pursued you not because you gave him everything, but because you withheld something essential. That was not cruelty. It was the silent mirror of his shadow at work. The more whole you appeared, the more restless he became. In truth, he was not chasing you. He was chasing the part of himself that you awakened. Jung warned that until a man makes the unconscious conscious, it will direct his life and he will call it fate. When a man says he is drawn to you against his will, what he means is that his shadow has found a home in your presence. There is danger here. For the shadow, if denied, becomes destructive. If he cannot face his hidden need to be vulnerable, to surrender, to worship the feminine beyond possession, then his desire twists into resentment. He will attempt to dominate what he cannot embrace. He will try to control what was meant to liberate him. This is why so many men oscillate between obsession and withdrawal, between declaring love and disappearing without reason. It is not you who confuses him. It is his own reflection in you that he cannot bear. And yet the woman who understands this dynamic becomes untouchable, not because she manipulates him, but because she sees through the illusion. She knows that his pursuit is not always about her, but about the hidden longing inside him that she has stirred. This knowledge frees her from the trap of overgiving, from the compulsion to prove her worth through his validation. She becomes the mirror that does not bend. And in her stillness, his shadow either rises to be integrated, or he retreats, unable to confront the storm within. Seneca once wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power, but few men truly have themselves." The shadow desire men never admit is precisely this: the wish to lose control in the presence of a feminine force that does not yield. To surrender not in weakness but in reverence. It is the longing for initiation, for transformation, for the death of the shallow ego and the birth of something deeper. Yet to confess such a desire feels like ruin, so they conceal it beneath layers of bravado. And so, they wander, restless, drawn again and again to women who embody qualities they cannot name. They feel consumed, addicted, even humiliated by the intensity of their longing. Jung saw this as the anima projection, where a man mistakes his inner feminine for the outer woman. He cannot yet realize that what he truly seeks is not her alone, but the missing fragments of himself. Still, the power remains with her. The woman who does not collapse under his projections, who does not barter her worth for his recognition. She holds the secret key. By needing nothing, she reveals everything. This is the danger and the beauty of feminine power, for when a woman refuses to be reduced to a man's possession, she becomes both the medicine and the poison of his soul. His shadow is awakened, and with it the chance to evolve, or to break. His shadow is not a monster to be destroyed, but a realm to be entered. Yet most men treat it as an intruder, barricading the door, pretending it does not exist. The more he denies it, the more it grows in silence. Jung warned that the shadow left unattended leaks out in destructive patterns. The sudden anger, the jealous rage, the inability to tolerate a woman's independence. But when faced with honesty, when embraced rather than exiled, it becomes a portal to his depth. And often it is the feminine that awakens this reckoning. The woman who embodies mystery, silence, and spiritual detachment is not playing games. She is simply aligned with her own wholeness, and in doing so, she provokes the man to confront what he cannot resolve. He sees her walking through life as though untouched by desperation, and something within him burns. This is not merely attraction, it is confrontation. Her presence alone whispers to him, "You are not whole. You are still split between the mask you wear and the soul you hide." Notice how a man often confuses desire with control. He believes his longing for her means he must conquer, possess, or dominate. Yet his deepest hunger is not for her body, but for the part of himself she awakens. When he says, "I can't stop thinking about you," what he is truly saying is, "I cannot escape the reflection you show me." It is a reflection of vulnerability, of surrender, of the humility his ego resists. She is not the wound. She is the mirror that exposes it. This is why detachment from a woman drives him into obsession. He does not crave constant access to her, but rather the shock of her absence. In silence, his shadow speaks louder. He feels abandoned, though she never promised him rescue. He feels unworthy, though she never accused him of failure. It is his own unconscious that torments him, using her as the stage upon which his hidden fears and unspoken desires play out. And here lies the secret most women do not realize. You do not need to chase, explain, or overcompensate to hold a man's attention. The most powerful influence arises not from over-attachment, but from sovereign stillness. Epictetus taught that freedom lies in detachment from what is beyond our control. A woman who understands this truth becomes unshakable. She knows that her silence is not weakness, but presence. She knows that her refusal to beg is not arrogance, but alignment with self-worth. And so, she becomes a force the male psyche cannot easily release. Men who are unprepared for such power may call her cold, aloof, or unattainable. Yet beneath their words lies confession. What they truly mean is, "She does not bend to my illusions, and it terrifies me." He may even despise her for awakening feelings he cannot master. But despise quickly turns into obsession, for the shadow does not vanish through denial. It clings tighter. Jung wrote that people do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The man who encounters this kind of woman is being summoned to his own awakening. Whether he answers or retreats is his choice, but the seed of confrontation is planted. You, as the woman who embodies this mystery, must understand the weight of this role. You are not merely a lover, not merely a companion. You are a catalyst. To some men, you will feel like salvation. To others, like destruction. Both are illusions, for you are neither. You are simply whole. And wholeness in a world of fragmentation is always seen as dangerous. Do not dilute your essence to soothe their insecurity. The shadow they fear is not you. It is themselves. Think of the paradox. The very strength that makes them accuse you of being distant is the strength that keeps them bound to you in memory. Years may pass, yet the imprint remains. They forget the ones who gave everything too easily. But never forget the one who remained sovereign. She is the wound that does not heal, because it was never hers to heal. It was his shadow calling him, begging to be faced, and she was the reminder he could not silence. This is why the archetype of the untouchable woman has echoed across cultures and myths. She appears as the goddess who cannot be possessed, the muse who inspires but never submits, the queen who loves yet does not kneel. Men write poems, build monuments, and wage wars in her name. But what they truly long for is the peace of themselves that her presence unveiled. She is a mirror of their soul, and mirrors cannot be owned. The lesson, then, is not to soften your detachment, but to embrace it. It is not cruelty. It is medicine. For just as the Stoics taught that suffering reveals character, so too does a woman's independence reveal the measure of a man. Some will shrink away, preferring comfort over growth. Others will rise, trembling but willing, ready to face their own shadow for the first time. And in this alchemy of attraction and fear, obsession and silence, a greater truth emerges. The woman who is whole within herself does not only transform her own life, she becomes the catalyst for the transformation of others. Not by effort, not by force, but simply by being. The confrontation with the shadow is never gentle. It rips away illusions, exposing the fragile scaffolding upon which the ego has built its false throne. For the man, the presence of a woman who needs nothing dismantles this scaffolding piece by piece. He watches her move through the world with grace that does not ask permission, with confidence that does not beg for validation, and his ego quivers under the weight of it. She becomes a mirror not of flattery but of truth, and truth is rarely comfortable. Jung spoke often of projection, the unconscious act of attributing disowned qualities onto others. A man may project his fragility onto her, accusing her of being distant when in fact it is he who cannot tolerate silence. He may project his own fear of abandonment onto her independence, painting her as cruel when she simply refuses to collapse into dependency. These projections become weapons, sharp words and accusations thrown not at her, but at the parts of himself he cannot face. To the untrained eye, it looks like conflict between two people. To the deeper soul, it is a battle between a man and his own shadow. The woman who understands this refuses to absorb the projections. She does not internalize his accusations as truth, nor does she carry the burden of soothing his every wound. She knows that stepping into his unconscious storm would only strip her of the very sovereignty that first awakened him, and so she stands firm not as an opponent but as a mirror. Her refusal to bend is not rejection. It is an invitation for him to meet himself fully. Most men flee from this invitation, for to accept it means to dismantle the self-image they have clung to for years. Yet those who stay, those who dare, find themselves transformed. This transformation often begins in silence. When she withdraws her energy, when she chooses detachment over entanglement, he is left alone with the echo of his own mind. No distractions, no flattery, no validation, only the raw truth of his unmet needs. It is here in the quiet that the shadow rises. He feels obsession because her absence awakens his fear of insignificance. He feels regret because her detachment reveals his dependency. What he calls love may sometimes be the mask for an unconscious plea. Show me who I am when I am not in control. The paradox of feminine detachment is that it ignites a man's longing more deeply than any display of affection. The woman who clings is comforting but forgettable. The woman who stands firm in her independence is unforgettable, precisely because she awakens in him what he denies. The Stoics knew this truth well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. A man consumed by shadow desire will dye every memory of her with longing and regret, unable to escape the impression she left. She becomes not just a woman in his life, but an archetype within his psyche, the symbol of all he could not control, all he could not possess, all he still yearns to integrate. You, as the woman, must recognize the sacred danger of this role. To embody wholeness is to stir storms in others, to not confuse their turbulence with your responsibility. Their shadow is not your burden to heal. You are not the cure. You are the catalyst. Jung himself wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. When you hold steady in your independence, you force him to confront what he would otherwise bury under conquest, distractions, or pride. Some will call you cruel. Others will worship you. But in truth, you are neither angel nor enemy. You are simply whole. This wholeness, however, comes with a price. The world often punishes women who refuse to need. Men may admire you in secret but criticize you in public, labeling your strength as arrogance or your silence as rejection. Yet beneath their words lies an unspoken recognition. They cannot forget you. And they cannot forget you because you are not merely a participant in their story. You are the rupture that forces them to rewrite it. Every man who encounters a woman like this is forever altered, even if he never admits it aloud. The shadow desire he carries is not weakness, though he treats it as shame. It is the longing to surrender his ego, to be touched by something greater than himself. But to admit this would mean stepping down from the throne of dominance. It would mean confessing that he too longs for the embrace of mystery, for the death of the shallow self. Most men do not rise to this confession. They bury it instead, chasing power, status, or control in an endless attempt to silence the truth. Yet the truth remains. The most dangerous and beautiful desire a man holds is the desire he will not name. And you, the woman who walks without begging, who moves without fear of loss, you awaken that desire without effort. Not because you seek it, but because your very being exposes what he has hidden. You are the reminder that he is not whole, the invitation he may never accept, and the mirror he cannot escape. Type continue to receive the next part. You said, Continue ChatGPT said, the unspoken desire that gnaws at a man's soul is not for comfort, but for transformation. It is not the gentle affection of a woman who validates his illusions that lingers in his memory, but the piercing presence of a woman who forces him to confront what he fears most, his own incompleteness. This is why Jung warned that the anima, the inner feminine, can both save and destroy a man, depending on whether he integrates her or continues to project her onto the women around him. The woman who embodies sovereignty becomes the living embodiment of this anima, and in her presence he is confronted with a choice: integration or despair. When he clings to ego, he mistakes her strength for rejection. He tells himself she is cold, unreachable, perhaps even unworthy of his time. Yet his body betrays him with restless longing. He cannot look away. He dreams of her, obsesses over her silence, and imagines what it would take to break her walls. But the truth is she has no walls. What he perceives as distance is simply self-possession, a state foreign to a man who relies on conquest to feel alive. And so he spirals. The harder he tries to claim her, the more his own shadow mocks him. The more she resists collapsing into dependency, the more he feels his own hollowness. For centuries, men have built kingdoms, written epics, and waged wars in search of power. Yet the power they fear most is the quiet one, the power of a woman who will not be moved by their status or promises. In her detachment, she calls his bluff. She makes him realize that the empire he has built, the image he presents, is not enough to secure the devotion of a soul who belongs to herself. And in that moment of realization, his mask begins to slip. The shadow enters. You may have seen this play out before. The man who appears indifferent until he senses you slipping away. The one who ignores your presence until your silence becomes unbearable. Suddenly he pursues. Suddenly he declares affection. Suddenly he is consumed. What changed? Not you. It was his confrontation with absence, the forced recognition that his validation did not hold you hostage. That recognition awakens the forbidden desire, not simply for you, but for the depth he has long repressed. Your detachment is not rejection. It is the opening of a wound he can no longer deny. The Stoics knew that loss strips us down to our essence. Epictetus taught that what disturbs men are not things, but the views they take of them. When a woman withdraws, what disturbs a man is not her absence, but the meaning he attaches to it. I am not enough. I am not in control. I am replaceable. This meaning terrifies him because it dismantles the illusion upon which his ego rests, and yet hidden within that terror is the possibility of rebirth. If he can face the shadow honestly, he can shed the false self and step into wholeness. But most resist. Most turn the fear into resentment, lashing out at the very woman who awakened the chance for growth. And here is the paradox for you. The more detached you are, the more deeply he becomes entangled. The more you embody silence, the louder his mind screams. You do not manipulate this. You simply live it. And in doing so, you embody what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, no longer dependent on external validation. Your wholeness is a silent revolution against his ego, and his ego will fight it, crave it, and sometimes worship it all at once. He may try to pull you back into dependency, not because he wants your weakness, but because your independence terrifies him. If you do not need him, then he must face the question of whether he has any value at all beyond the role of provider, conqueror, or protector. Few men dare to explore value beyond these roles. It is easier to demand need than to cultivate depth. Yet your refusal to collapse into need is the invitation he secretly craves. It is the shadow desire he will not confess, the desire for a woman who stands as his equal, who sees through his masks, who forces him to meet himself fully. This desire is dangerous because it dismantles the very foundation of his identity. But it is also liberating. For the man willing to face it, her presence becomes alchemy. His obsession turns into awakening. His fear becomes humility. His longing transforms into respect. He no longer seeks to own her but to evolve beside her. Such men are rare, but they exist, and they are forged not in comfort but in confrontation with the very shadow they once denied. For you, this truth is a shield. It means you do not need to chase, to beg, or to mold yourself into palatable shapes for male approval. Your strength lies not in how much you can give to sustain his illusions, but in how deeply you can root yourself in your own sovereignty. In doing so, you awaken what he cannot suppress, whether he admits it or not. You become unforgettable not by clinging, but by refusing to abandon yourself. The shadow desire men carry is woven with paradox, a yearning they dare not confess even to themselves. It is the longing to dissolve the armor, to surrender to something larger than their own ego. Yet the ego is built to resist surrender. And so, they hide this hunger beneath layers of pride, bravado, and control. But when confronted with the presence of a woman who needs nothing, that armor cracks. Her quiet certainty, her refusal to beg, her radiant independence, these qualities force him into a psychological crucible, and in that crucible he feels both terror and desire. Jung understood that the psyche resists integration because it means death to the old self. A man whose identity depends on dominance and recognition cannot easily admit he yearns for the feminine to undo him. But the undoing he fears is also the transformation he needs. The anima, in her highest form, invites him into wholeness. She does not exist to flatter his ego, but to expose its limits. The woman who carries herself with sovereign grace embodies this anima. She awakens not just lust, but the trembling desire to collapse into vulnerability, to touch the depths he has buried. This is why men chase what they cannot control. The compliant woman may soothe his pride, but she rarely lingers in his soul. It is the one who walks away, the one who keeps her mystery intact, who becomes his haunting. He does not remember the one who worshipped him. He remembers the one who made him confront his emptiness, and though he may never admit it, his shadow craves that confrontation, for within it lies the chance to evolve. Silence is her weapon, though she does not wield it as a game. It is simply the natural expression of her self-possession. When she withdraws, she does not do so in malice. She does so because she refuses to beg for recognition that should flow freely. In that absence, he collapses into obsession. His mind spins stories, his ego panics, his heart aches with regret. He wonders if she ever needed him at all, and that question shakes him to his core. The truth, unspoken yet undeniable, is that she never did. She desired him perhaps, but she did not require him. And this distinction is what separates fascination from forgetfulness. You must see the sacred psychology in this dynamic. Men are not only drawn to the feminine body, they are magnetized by the feminine soul. The rare woman who stands complete, whose silence is not a plea but a statement, touches their deepest hidden longing, the longing to be stripped of illusion. They fear it, but they cannot resist it. They may try to break it down with criticism or control, yet every attempt only deepens the imprint. The more he tries to convince himself she is ordinary, the more extraordinary she becomes in memory. Stoic philosophy offers a parallel here. Marcus Aurelius urged that the soul should retreat into itself, into an inner citadel where no external force can penetrate. The woman who builds this citadel within herself becomes unassailable. A man may desire her fiercely, but he cannot conquer what belongs only to her. And the more he realizes he cannot storm the gates of her sovereignty, the more he aches for her. This is not mere romance. It is the torment of a soul confronted with its own incompleteness. For the woman, this understanding becomes liberation. She no longer fears being too silent, too distant, too strong. She knows that what some men call too much is in fact the precise quality that awakens their hidden desire. She understands that the ones who run from her were never capable of meeting their own shadow, and therefore were never capable of meeting her. And she refuses to diminish her light to make them comfortable in their darkness. When a man does not integrate his shadow, he will alternate between obsession and resentment. He will desire her and despise her in the same breath, because she represents both the salvation he craves and the vulnerability he rejects. But when a man dares to face himself, to hold his emptiness without projection, her presence transforms him. He no longer seeks to possess her, but to grow in her reflection. He becomes capable of love not as need, but as reverence. This is the forbidden desire, not simply to touch her, but to be undone by her. To shed the false self and stand naked in truth. Few men admit this, for it demands humility. But it is there, restless and unspoken, driving their obsession, shaping their regrets, haunting their dreams. And the woman who knows this truth walks the earth with quiet power. She does not chase, she does not beg, she simply is. And in her being she awakens everything they cannot hide. The shadow desire once stirred never truly dies. It clings to a man's psyche like an echo that refuses to fade. He may move on, surround himself with new faces, new conquests, new distractions, yet the memory of the sovereign woman remains imprinted in his unconscious. Why? Because she was never simply a woman to him. She was an archetype, the living embodiment of everything he longed for and feared. She was the fracture in his armor, the silence that revealed his noise, the mirror that showed him the gap between who he pretended to be and who he truly was. Jung described this process as the encounter with the anima, the eternal feminine within a man's soul. If he integrates her, he evolves. If he resists, he suffers. The woman who awakens his shadow desire does not choose this role. She simply lives in her wholeness. Yet to him her presence feels like fate. He cannot explain why he obsesses, why her absence feels louder than her presence, why no amount of pleasure or conquest fills the void she left. It is because what he sought in her was never entirely hers. It was his own soul calling from beneath the surface. This is why detachment is so powerful. When a woman does not cling, she forces him to see what remains when she is gone. And often what remains is emptiness. He feels this as loss, as regret, as obsession, but the truth is simpler. Her absence reveals his dependence. A man who has not faced himself cannot tolerate the independence of another. It reminds him too clearly of what he has not yet built within. You, as the woman who carries this strength, must understand the inevitability of misunderstanding. Many men will call you distant, cold, or unfeeling when in truth you are only whole. They mistake your silence for rejection, when in truth it is sovereignty. They mistake your refusal to beg as arrogance, when in truth it is alignment with your worth. Their accusations are not about you. They are confessions of their own insecurity. Every word they hurl at you is a shadow slipping out in disguise. Consider the paradox of obsession. The more he resents you for not collapsing into need, the more unforgettable you become. He may hate your independence, but he cannot stop thinking about it. He may accuse you of being unapproachable, yet he returns in thought to the way your presence disarmed him. Obsession, regret, fixation. These are not signs of weakness in you, but evidence of the shadow working through him. His soul has been touched by something his ego cannot command, and that dissonance burns within him like fire. The ancients understood this in myth and story, from Helen of Troy to the dark goddesses of every culture. Men have been undone not by women who clung, but by women who carried themselves as sovereign beings. Such figures were called dangerous not because they wielded swords, but because they wielded mystery. Their very detachment unsettled kingdoms, toppled empires, and rewrote destinies. In Jungian terms, these women embodied the anima in her untamed form, awakening the unconscious in every man who encountered them. The response was rarely calm. It was obsession, worship, fear, and sometimes destruction. Yet beneath it all lay the same truth. The woman who needs nothing exposes the man who cannot live without illusion. And what of you? You must not shrink from this role nor fear the turbulence it creates. Your power is not in how many chase you, but in how deeply you remain unshaken whether they stay or go. Epictetus would remind you, freedom is not what others give, but what you claim when you detach from their control. When you embody this, you become the citadel of your own soul. No man can invade it, though many may try. And the more they fail, the more they remember you. The shadow desire men never admit is their longing for a woman who mirrors their hidden need for surrender. But until they face that need with humility, they are left in torment. Some will flee you, running toward easier illusions. Others will stay close, consumed by their own obsession, unable to break away. A rare few will rise, facing themselves at last, and in doing so will meet you not as conqueror, not as captor, but as equal. It is in this rare meeting that true union is born, not of dependency, not of projection, but of reverence. When the man integrates his shadow, he no longer seeks to own the woman who awakened it. He seeks to stand beside her, not as a half searching for completion, but as a whole drawn to another whole. This is the love that does not bind but liberates. The love that Jung saw as the fruit of individuation, the love that is both dangerous and divine. And so the truth is clear. The shadow desire men never admit is not simply about women, but about themselves. It is the desire to surrender the ego, to dissolve the mask, to finally meet the depths they have avoided. The sovereign woman does not create this desire, she awakens it. She does not chase it, she does not feed it, she does not bend for it. She allows it to rise, and in doing so she holds the mirror that changes everything. The woman who knows this truth becomes unforgettable, not because she is flawless, not because she is compliant, but because she is free. And freedom is the rarest and most dangerous beauty of all. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. Andy.